All right, so I'm making a quick video, but I gotta babysit my son. So I got a really cool Palantir video. This is a guy called Doug Philippone. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. He's worth over $100 million. He's a co-founder of a thing called Snowpoint. And Snowpoint allows for commercial businesses to come up with technology and work with the United States government, specifically military, but specifically Army. He's also a veteran of an Army Ranger. He's also a defensive lead for Palantir. He is basically the person that ran the entire datification of the United States Army back in like 2019 for Palantir. So he's somebody. And he has this a podcast where he's talking him. There's a lieutenant general, which is a 3-star general, and they're on a podcast and they're talking about data implementation and technology implementation when it comes to, my son is throwing his little truck while I'm trying to make a video to make some money. And they have a really, really cool podcast. I'm going to play it for you right now. Pay attention to what they're saying. And it's a really cool podcast. It's 15 minutes. I took out all the bad parts. You guys are going to enjoy it. Thank you so much. Please give me the like, share, and subscribe. And if not for me, do it for my family. My son is running away with his little tractor. I'll talk to you guys later. It ain't easy being greasy.
Hi, welcome to the 2023 Army State of Innovation podcast here at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Really appreciate everybody joining us. We've got a pretty cool little informal conversation just to really look at what are we doing as an Army and as a nation to capture that spirit of innovation, like that kind of drives economic activity across the country, business and commerce, as well as supporting the common defense. And really, we've got a great panel here that kind of covers a lot of ground. So I'm Colonel Jay Wisham from the Army Applications Lab here in Army Futures Command. We have a pretty simple mission. We solve Army problems, and we try to help out a lot of folks across the entire force, including the rest of the DoD, look for current technology, interesting ways of doing things, and finding the right solvers for our problems. We also like partnering with small businesses, non-traditionals, as well as larger systems integrators, hardware, software, you name it. We're just trying to find the right athletes to work on national problems.
Chris Donahue, 18th Airborne Corps Commander.
Yeah, Doug Philippone, the co-founder of Snowpoint Ventures, a dual-purpose technology venture firm that I take money from wealthy Americans and I convince entrepreneurs across the country to build amazing things for government and the defense sector.
It's no secret over the last year, really, there's been a lot of things going on in the world that's driving a conversation about technology, the geopolitical ramifications of the movement of technology. What are we seeing in terms of the current state of war? General Donahue, you were like probably one of the point men for the country that like started to look at that problem. I was one of the last advise and assist units in Ukraine back in 17 and 18, working with that. I'm kind of interested to see what you initially saw when you came in terms of the utilization of broadband commercial tools, maybe repurposed for military actions. What were you seeing that you thought was like, wow, that's something the Ukrainians are doing that we need to look at?
Jay, the first thing is the United States Army has been looking at this. So this is a very exciting time to be in the Army. If you look at everything that's going on and where the direction the Army is headed and what we are doing right now is you look across the world, not just Ukraine, but everywhere else. The first thing is I would argue we're on track. Now we got a heck of a lot of work to do, as we all know. I think probably the first thing that you would, when you look at Ukraine and anyone who's looking at that and watching it, there's two things other than just the fact that the Ukrainians are clearly very brave warrior people, but they adapt and they integrate better than any other military I've ever seen. That's the first thing that jumps out. The next thing is clearly they're facing an existential threat, and they will leverage anything, whether it's you're hearing about Starlink, LEO satellite,
Sure.
Really anything that's required to win and survive. And I think that's the lesson: adaptation, integration, and just that ability to do anything to overcome to make sure that they prevail.
Over the summer, I actually went to Kyiv to see the problem firsthand. And it is pretty interesting how look, their nation depends on it. And you know, you just see all these examples where, you know, there's mass murder and crimes all over the place where they know that just like this is an exigent thing for them, and so they're all uniting as a culture, where they're happy to work 20 hours a day, like they're in this, and and it's kind of exciting, you know, where you're in there and to see the innovation, like, hey, you can't be lazy, you have to figure this out. But when you see those times, and this is from my experience on both the software side and on the venture capital side in the U.S., I do see with the U.S. military as well. But it's like in those exigent moments, it's where you make the most. Right. You make the most progress. Where it's like you know, your men's lives depends on it. You have to perform the mission. Your stuff either works or it doesn't, and you have to innovate with what you have. You make it happen, and you're seeing that there. But I see that in our forces as well. It's like that's where you know, when our soldiers are in combat, where you see the biggest changes.
In terms of communicating what you're seeing and what we need to do, what's the hardest thing to communicate? What are you struggling? Because I candidly have this problem. How do you explain a technology versus a capability, and then like putting that together for people? It's hard to grapple with. I'm kind of curious how you've experienced that, or maybe some challenges with that.
I think it's kind of threefold. One, the first thing is just making sure people understand what point are we at, right?
Yep.
It's no different. It's completely different, but it is similar in that right before, you know, World War II and the years kind of leading up to it, you know, the first people to harness the power of the FM radio to do what we now call combined arms, you know, fighting was the Germans. And then the U.S. was ultimately able to take it to scale, and other nations, to defeat a number of nations. So we're at a similar point. Again, not complete. It's not the same, but it is similar.
Right.
And that's with data and all the other tech that's out there, from different sensors, transport layer, et cetera, cloud, the ability to actually get stuff out of data. So we're there. So one, you just have to explain it to your team so they know. That's the first thing. The second thing is just culture, right? You're asking people to change. And that's probably the most difficult thing, is that. And then you gotta work it into the Army system, right? So all those things together, that's what we have to, and you're seeing progress, right? Now, I'm not Pollyannish. We got a lot of work to go, okay? Everyone in the Army would tell you that. But you're starting to see that the right momentum moving forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely challenges. I mean, I think we're at an interesting point where the military, and I think, you know, the Army in particular, the problems are fascinating, you know. And so from an innovative standpoint of like where you're going to you're going to build new technology that can, at the most part, there's like, you see like, what's the core thing you're doing? You're usually helping people make decisions.
Yep.
You know, like how do you make a decision better, more informed? And then that sometimes it's an all software thing. Sometimes it's a hardware thing that has a sensor that's collecting some information. And then how do you put all that together so that you can make the best decision and do something about it fast, you know, faster than your enemy. And you do see, again, like I mentioned before, the exigent moments, it's where you see the most change and where you can push the bureaucracy in a good way. That's, you know, the DoD is a lumbering machine, but you do see those moments where it's like, look, this matters. You know, we have to solve this problem, and you can make really, really interesting steps forward, because it's like, look, does something work or not? We need the capability. We have to win. You know, and as much as we talk about China, it's like, if we're serious about this, we just need to get the capability.
You know, every person in 18th Airborne Corps. So if you're the G1, the G4, the G3, the G2. You own the data of your warfighting function ultimately, because every warfighting function has to be part of this. If you got to get the data right, you know. So all that leads into, you know, all the efforts of what we're trying to do to make sure that, you know, everyone loves to throw out the information dominance or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Is that you want to take out as much uncertainty as possible. So as the commander, you're making the best decision so that you can carry the day and accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish and take care of your people as well as you can, right? That's it. It's not hard, right? Yeah. Data is two things. We use data to make our people better and to make sure that we can, it's about war fighting. It's about fighting and winning, right? That's what data is all about. It's that simple. Everything else kind of falls into place when you keep it focused on those two things. Everybody who comes into 18th Airborne Corps, we're using the Army Combat Fitness Test as the vehicle with our people and a bunch of other stuff too. Everybody gets screened. You take a diagnostic ACFT. That way we see exactly where you are. When you depart 18th Airborne Corps, we should see where you're at with the ACFT. And there's all kinds of other data on the people side that we have that the Army system has for you right now. So you should be able to track everybody, okay? We owe it to them. People join the Army to do great things. Let's make sure they do great things. We have to make sure that they're prepared to go to combat, right? So all that people stuff, it's extremely important. The Army has always been people. So there's that aspect of it. And then on the warfighting side, we should have all the warfighting functions digitized, and we should be able to squeeze the uncertainty out of those decisions. You're never going to take it all out. It's combat, right? We all know that. You're never going to take it all out. But data should allow us to squeeze as much uncertainty out and make sure that we have the most informed picture when we're making planning decisions or decisions in execution. And then we should have a mission command system that can put all this together, stationary or on the move. Okay, stationary or on the move, so that commanders can be present and make the right decisions. And I'll stop there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So when you look at like where the Army, so why is this a unique challenge for the Army in the sense of like, how did the Army get where they are today? And then how do you move forward? It's sort of a fascinating journey in the sense of, the DoD was one of the first organizations to, start leveraging computers. So you have like, so 50 years of mainframe computers to the most exquisite sensor that's out there, right? And then, a myriad of things in between. And it's like, how do you, over the time, from that beginning, you have all these new systems that have all been made in a very specific way. It's like, how do you get them to talk to each other? Right. So it's like the truth is out there. And it's like, what you don't want to do is have, some poor sergeant or a captain where they're spending all their time searching for the data, or they have to go put it in 15,000 places. It's like the soldiers are already busy enough. Like, how do you find all that stuff? And it's just like, how do you connect that stuff so that you just look in one place and then you can make those decisions quick?
It sounds really easy to say that, doesn't it?
Well,
but that's the key, right?
Yeah.
But data should unencumber you so that you can be present.
That's the truth.
Right?
That's where people miss.
That's the key, right? This isn't about being cool or anything else. This is about making sure that our leaders can be present in the right location at the right time, whether that's training, whether that's at PT or anything else. All the various efforts that, General Morrison is doing, my Command Sergeant Major Holland with the 82nd, with the leader engagement tool, started under Command Sergeant Major Pitt now. The new All-American 9 has it. I mean, these are the type of things that people are doing right now that allows people to be present, that allows us to get visibility into things that we haven't before. Yeah. And that's the true key thing about data, right?
I was going to jump in real fast. So, I mean, one of the interesting things about that point is oftentimes the military thinks that their problems are unique, when in reality, they're not unique at all. Right? Yeah. There's some like edge case of higher difficulty or something like that, but the core problem is really the same. When you're talking about the airlines and so forth, it's like, at the end of the day, like the difference, they're thinking about like, how do I deliver something cheaper, faster, better, and drive the bottom line, but they're still like making decisions and so forth. And a lot of times it's like, hey, there's safety involved. People could die if we screw this up, but how do we, think about have a ton of experience working with airlines, but it's like, how do you make those maintenance decisions? How do you optimize the cost of when you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, and keep planes flying? And those are very similar to a lot of the same stuff in terms of like managing people. There's a lot to be learned in terms of that's the exciting thing of what they call it dual purpose technology, but it's like, how do you take something that's been developed, it can apply to the commercial market, but then it can also go back to the military. That's an interesting paradigm because you're solving all these these problems, and then you have an entrepreneur that says, all right, I can apply this to the military, but then it takes some sort of a translator person to be like, all right, let me tell you about the military problem. I was thinking about this. I mean, if I rewind the clock, being a commander a million years ago, there was one of these interesting things that I had to learn where there was, I had a wrong assumption that when I took, after a target or something like that, you're taking the evidence and the intelligence, and then you're like putting it on a helicopter and it's going to go away to some really smart person somewhere else, and there's like some fleet of geniuses really far away that and I had to learn this sort of the hardware is that no one cares more about this than you do, and nobody knows more about it than you do. So you need to solve the problem. And that goes to this innovation thing. It's like, if you aren't going to figure it out, there's not some magic person really far away that's going to solve this for you.
Yeah, well, the trick is how do you empower those people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing. Again, I'm glad you brought that up in terms of understanding how software is built. It's like software is never done. It changes every day, and you have to get feedback from the users where they say, this sucks. This is good. Keep going in this direction. This is what I need to do. It's like you're building it on the fly, right? You have to have a platform of sorts to start with that takes some development. But then once you're solving the problems, it's like, are we solving the right problem? And it has to be, you can't have this world where you're like separated from the users. It's like you have to be there at the problem, because that's where you get the best feedback, and then you can really move fast. I mean, that's like whatever, all those stupid buzzwords, but it's like, that's how you actually build software.
Curious on your side, when you're looking at companies, investments you need to make, things you need to push, how do you gauge what's important for you to put your time and your capital that you pull from a lot of rich Americans to put on Army problems,
sure,
or government problems? Like, how do you like laser that down to the most important thing to pick and do? Like, how do we get that into, General Donahue's soldiers' hands, like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes two ways. It's like a push and a pull, right? Where it's like you're seeing, once a word gets out that, we're investing in a certain sector, good entrepreneurs start seeking you out, right? And so then you do all these meetings and you sort of look at their technology. And so when they're showing you their technology or whatever problem they solve, it's probably a better way to say it, is whatever problem they're solving, with my team, are collective light bulbs going off where it's like, okay, we know that the Army's asking for this, or I know just from my life journey that that's actually a problem that people care about and that needs to be solved. And then that like, okay, well, in this Venn diagram of like, if the Army's not asking for it, but I know that it's a problem, and that at least the units are asking for it, and maybe it hasn't made it to the program of records type status yet, or there's not a solicitation or something like. It's like, how do you use all the agile ways that you can do acquisition to like start that, so you can get in front of a user to say like, hey, is this real or not? Is this actually helpful? That's usually how that works. And then from a perspective of seeing the problem, like, when I mentioned when I went to Kyiv, it's like, just like being a commander, you have to go to the front line and see what the hell's going on. Like, you can't be a million miles away and be like, theoretically, I know this is a problem. You have to get your hands dirty and see what's going on. And then you're like, all right, based off of this, I know what the problem is. And then I'm going to go search for that person who's building this thing. And then you use a broader network, the broader network of venture capitalists, you can get to it pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, when we think of like our freedoms as a nation and just the prosperity of the United States, there's no more important mission than like protecting our liberty. And I firmly believe that, in terms of software, America has by far the best software makers by a long shot. And I do believe that we need to build an ecosystem where, to all of the entrepreneurs out there, the Army has some of the funnest, most interesting, challenging problems that there are. It's worth solving. And we need to get our best and brightest minds working on the problems of the department versus like selling ads and making video games. And so I'm trying to put up the bat sign to say like, hey, come help, because they need our help.